The wind cut across the empty fields like a cold reminder of what she had lost. Lena tightened her coat around her shoulders and squinted at the outline of the old house in the distance, half buried in snow and shadow. For years she had avoided this place, letting painful memories linger in the corners of her mind rather than confronting them. But now, with her son Eli in tow and nowhere else to turn, she had no choice. The house was theirs, or at least, it had to be. Lena's boots crunched over the frozen earth as she approached the porch, each step echoing in the vast silence. The wooden steps creaked ominously under her weight, and she pressed the door handle cautiously, expecting it to resist her touch. It swung open with a groan, revealing the interior frozen in time. Dust coated the surfaces, and frost crept along the edges of the window panes, making the light inside pale and brittle. It was a house abandoned, neglected, a shell of warmth that had once been filled with laughter and love. She paused in the doorway, taking in the barren rooms. The air smelled faintly of old wood, damp earth, and something faintly metallic blood memory, she thought, recalling the years of family dinners, birthday celebrations, and quiet evenings by the fire. Now it smelled of emptiness, and Lena felt a pang of fear. Could she do this? Could she bring life back to a house so cold, so quiet, so utterly abandoned? Eli tugged at her sleeve, his small face peeking up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mom, it's really cold in here," he said softly. Lena knelt to meet his gaze, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I know, baby," she whispered, "but we're going to make it warm again. We'll make it ours." Her words sounded more like a promise to herself than reassurance to him. And even as she said them, doubt gnawed at the edges of her courage. She moved through the house slowly, opening doors, lifting curtains, peering into corners that had been forgotten for years. Each room carried remnants of the past: an overturned chair here, a broken vase there, faded photographs stuck to the walls with cracked tape. Lena's fingers traced the frames, lingering over the faces of people long gone, her own parents' smiling faces staring back at her. She felt a lump in her throat, a mixture of grief and resolve. The house had been abandoned by all, yes, but it would not abandon her. Not if she had anything to say about it. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the frozen floorboards, Lena began clearing a space for Eli to sit. She unpacked the few supplies they had brought, stacking blankets and firewood near the fireplace that hadn't been used in years. It was a small effort, almost laughable in the face of the work ahead, but it was a start. The house might be abandoned, cold, and broken, but here and now, it was becoming a home slowly, painfully. Stubbornly, Lena sank into a chair, Eli curled beside her, and she let herself breathe for the first time in what felt like forever. Abandoned? Yes. Alone? Perhaps. But as she looked around at the frozen walls and the young boy's trusting eyes, she felt the first flicker of hope. She would rebuild this house, and in doing so, she would rebuild herself and her son's life. One wall, one floorboard, one small act of love at a time. Tonight, the house was still cold, still abandoned in many ways. But tomorrow, the work would begin, and with it, the warmth, the life, and the promise that being left alone did not mean being powerless. The morning sunlight seeped weakly through frost-lined windows, casting fractured patterns across the dusty floor. Lena rose early, determined to explore the house more thoroughly before the cold seeped deeper into her bones. She felt a strange mixture of trepidation and anticipation. This house, abandoned by everyone else, held fragments of lives lived, laughter shared, and love long gone. And now it would become the canvas for her own family's new beginning. She began in the living room, brushing away layers of dust from a cracked coffee table. Beneath the grime, the wood gleamed faintly, hinting at the care it once received. Lena knelt, running her fingers along the scratches and dents, tracing the stories embedded in the surfaces. Each mark told a tale, perhaps a child's mischievous game or a hurried gesture of impatience. Her heart tightened. She remembered the laughter of her own parents and siblings here, echoes that had long since faded from these walls. Moving to the walls, Lena discovered a collection of faded photographs taped haphazardly. She picked one up carefully. A family portrait, smiles frozen in time, faces bright with hope and innocence. The edges curled and yellowed with age, but the emotions captured within them were timeless. She saw herself as a child, standing between her mother and father, Eli's young grandmother's eyes twinkling with joy. A pang of longing gripped her chest. Her parents were gone, her family fractured, but beneath it all, Lena felt a surge of determination. These memories weren't meant to be locked away in sorrow. They were meant to inspire her. Every room she explored revealed more relics. In the kitchen, she found a rusted cookie tin tucked away in a cupboard, faint smells of vanilla clinging stubbornly to its lid. On the counter lay a chipped teapot and a stack of yellowed recipe cards. Lena ran her hand over the familiar handwriting, recognizing her mother's elegant script. She smiled faintly through tears, imagining the meals once shared here, the conversations and laughter that had warmed the space. In the bedrooms, remnants of long-past lives emerged. Broken toys, frayed quilts, and a lone rocking chair whispered stories of children who had once slept here, of nights spent dreaming and days filled with small joys. Lena felt a deep sense of responsibility settle on her shoulders. These items weren't just objects. They were threads connecting the past to the present, threads she would weave into the new life she intended to build. Eli wandered beside her, curious about the discoveries. "Mom, who's that?" he asked, pointing to a photo of a little girl who looked strangely like Lena herself. She knelt and smiled, brushing dust from the frame. "That's me when I was your age," she said softly. "This house, it's full of stories. And now you and I are going to add our own." Eli's eyes sparkled. Absorbing the idea that their family's presence could breathe life into these abandoned walls. By the afternoon, Lena had begun imagining the house not as it was, but as it could be. She pictured the living room filled with light and laughter, the kitchen bustling with warmth and the smell of fresh bread, the bedrooms safe and cozy havens for Eli. Every object she touched seemed to whisper encouragement. The house, though cold and neglected, was not lifeless. It was waiting for her, waiting for the care, attention, and love she was ready to give. For the first time in years, Lena felt a sense of purpose that extended beyond mere survival. This house was more than wood and stone. It was a repository of memories, a vessel for hope, and a foundation for the future. As the sun dipped low, she gathered Eli close, and they sat together on the dusty floor. Around them lay fragments of the past, but in her heart, Lena already felt the stirrings of renewal. This house had once held life, and now, under her care, it would hold it again. The first week of rebuilding was harder than Lena had imagined. The house groaned under its own age, as if complaining at the intrusion of life after years of abandonment. Every step across the creaking floorboards reminded her that she was alone in this endeavor. No family, no partner, just her and Eli against the cold. Unforgiving world. Lena had started with the basics, clearing snow from the roof and porch, stacking firewood by the fireplace, and patching the smallest leaks in the windows. Yet for every small victory, another problem emerged. The stove refused to light, the plumbing groaned ominously, and the roof leaked during a sudden spring thaw, sending icy drips onto the floorboards. Each setback tested her patience, but she refused to surrender. "We can do this, Eli," she told her son, forcing a smile she didn't entirely feel. He nodded earnestly, his small hands clutching hers. Giving her courage, she didn't realize she still had Dot by midday. Lena's arms ached from hauling firewood and repairing broken fixtures. Her hands were raw, calloused, and scraped from contact with splintered wood. Sweat mixed with dirt and snowflakes as she moved through the house, methodically checking each room for the most urgent repairs. Despite exhaustion, she felt a strange satisfaction in seeing tangible progress, however incremental. Each repaired window or cleared corner became a small symbol of control over the chaos that had once seemed overwhelming. Meals were another battle. With a broken stove and only a small fireplace, Lena resorted to heating soup over an open flame, improvising tools and methods as she went. Ele watched with fascination as she turned simple ingredients into something warm and nourishing. She realized that survival wasn't just about repairing walls, it was about creating moments of comfort and safety, however modest for both of them. Loneliness, however, pressed on her heart. The nights were the hardest. As darkness swallowed the frozen landscape outside, Lena felt the silence of the house like a heavy weight pressing against her chest. Eli's breathing, soft and even in sleep, reminded her that she wasn't entirely alone, yet the absence of laughter, conversation, and companionship gnawed at her resolve. She wrapped herself in a blanket by the fireplace, staring at the cold, shadowed walls, imagining what it would be like to fill the space with warmth, love, and life. Some moments of despair crept in despite her determination. A particularly harsh night of wind tore at the windows, rattling frames and loosening shingles. Lena rushed through the rooms, securing what she could, her body trembling from cold, fatigue, and worry. She paused in the living room, breathing heavily, and realized she could either give in or push forward. "We can't give up," she whispered to herself. "Not now. Not ever." Yet, through all the struggle, there were sparks of hope. A broken window finally sealed, a stubborn door realigned, and a small corner of the house cleared enough for Eli to play safely brought fleeting triumphs. Each success, no matter how minor, reminded Lena why she was doing this: for her son, for herself, and for the home that could once again become a place of belonging. By the end of the week, Lena sat on the repaired porch, snow crunching underfoot. Eli snuggled against her side. The house was far from complete, far from the cozy haven she dreamed of, but it was no longer simply abandoned. It was alive with effort, intent, and the beginnings of hope. Lena felt the first stirrings of pride and anticipation. The struggle was ongoing, exhausting, and relentless, but it was hers. And she would see it through. As she watched the sun dip behind the hills, painting the frozen landscape in gold. Lena whispered softly, "Tomorrow, we keep going. One step, one nail, one wall at a time." And for the first time in years, she truly believed it could be done. Spring crept slowly across the ranch, melting the snow in uneven patches and revealing the rough, frozen earth beneath. Lena woke to the pale sunlight filtering through frost-streaked windows and immediately set to work, repairing a leaky section of the roof before the midday rain could find its way in. Eli followed quietly, carrying small bundles of wood, his small hands steadying the larger pieces that Lena passed him. It was hard work, as it always was, but today felt different. As Lena hauled a bucket of nails from the shed, she noticed a figure approaching down the frozen driveway. At first, she braced herself, expecting trouble or worse, judgment. But the stranger was a neighbor she had seen only in passing before, Mrs. Callahan, a widow who lived a few miles over, with a reputation for kindness and generosity. The older woman carried a basket filled with fresh-baked bread, jars of preserves, and a small bundle of warm blankets. "I thought you might need these," Mrs. Callahan said with a gentle smile. "I remember your mother always made sure there was enough food in the house, no matter what. Thought you might like to keep the tradition going." Lena's throat tightened. She hadn't realized how starved she was for human connection, for the comfort of someone acknowledging her struggle. "Thank you," she whispered, voice thick. "Really, thank you." Word of Lena's work on the old ranch house began to spread slowly through the small town. Over the next few days, more neighbors appeared, not in crowds, but in quiet, measured ways that made Lena feel seen without threatening her independence. A young couple brought tools and supplies that had been sitting unused in their garage. A retired carpenter offered advice on reinforcing the roof beams. Even the local grocery store owner dropped off a sack of flour and sugar, saying only, "You'll need it for those winter recipes your mother always made." At first, Lena resisted. She had spent so long fending for herself that accepting help felt foreign, almost shameful. But she began to realize that assistance didn't diminish her strength, it amplified it. Each helping hand allowed her to accomplish what she couldn't do alone, to move faster, to repair more, and to envision the home she and Eli could create. The house, once so daunting and cold, seemed to breathe a little easier under the care of more hands. Eli, naturally curious and endlessly observant, watched the visitors with fascination. He followed them around, asking questions, learning how to hammer nails, carry bundles of wood, and even patch small cracks in the walls. Lena marveled at how much he had grown not just in skill, but in spirit. The boy, once timid and unsure, now smiled broadly as neighbors complimented his efforts. For the first time, he began to feel a sense of ownership and pride in their home. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Lena and Eli sat on the newly cleared porch steps, watching the warm glow of lanterns in the windows of the house. She felt a profound shift within herself. The isolation that had once felt inescapable now seemed temporary, punctuated by the kindness of others who had quietly stepped into her life. The house, still far from finished, was no longer just her burden to bear. It was a shared vision, a growing community of care, hope, and resilience. Lena realized that rebuilding wasn't just about mending walls or patching leaks. It was about opening herself to connection, trusting in the generosity of others, and allowing the world to help carry the weight of life's challenges. The frozen house had begun to thaw, not only from the hands of labor, but from the warmth of hearts willing to show up, week after week, offering a bit of strength, encouragement, and love. As night fell, Lena whispered to Eli, "See, baby? We're not really alone. Not anymore." And in his wide, trusting eyes, she saw hope mirrored back, a promise that together they could turn this house into a home. One act of kindness, one repaired wall, and one shared meal at a time. The days grew longer and warmer as spring unfurled its green across the ranch, and with the changing season came a subtle shift in Lena's own heart. The house, once a hollow shell of frost and shadow, now hummed faintly with life-creaking floors and patched windows carrying the warmth of human presence. Yet even as her hands worked to restore the walls and roof, Lena realized that the greatest work was happening within herself. It began in small, almost imperceptible ways. While scrubbing the old kitchen counters, she paused to hum a tune her mother used to sing, feeling a lightness she hadn't known in years. She laughed aloud when Eli tripped over a loose floorboard and tumbled into a pile of blankets, his giggles filling the room. Those moments, simple, fleeting, ordinary, were stitches mending the emotional wounds she had carried silently for too long. Lena began to allow herself dreams again, dreams that had been pushed aside when survival alone became her only priority. She imagined a future in which the ranch thrived, not just the land and the house, but her own spirit. She pictured herself tending the animals, planting a garden, and sharing meals in the kitchen with neighbors who had become friends. The house was no longer a monument to isolation. It was a vessel for possibility. Even her body began to feel the shift. The stiffness in her back from long days of labor softened as the sun warmed the porch where she rested. Her hands, once raw and sore, now carried strength and confidence. And while fatigue was ever present, it was tempered by a growing sense of purpose, the knowledge that every repaired wall, every cleared path, and every act of care was a tangible step toward a life reclaimed. Eli noticed the change too. He began to explore the ranch on his own, helping tend the animals or gather firewood without hesitation, his small but capable hands eager to contribute. Watching him flourish brought Lena a quiet, profound joy. She realized that by nurturing the house and her son, she was also nurturing herself, healing parts of her heart that she hadn't even recognized as wounded. One afternoon, while working on the back porch, Lena paused to watch the horizon. The hills rolled gently under a golden sun, and the wind carried the scent of newly thawed earth and blooming wildflowers. It struck her how long it had been since she had felt truly at peace, not merely surviving but thriving. She took a deep breath and allowed herself a moment of gratitude for the house, for Eli, for the neighbors who had offered their support, and most importantly, for herself. She was still standing. She was still building. And she was finally healing. In these quiet moments, Lena began reflecting on the relationship she had lost and the dream she had abandoned. She didn't dwell on regret. Instead, she used it as fuel. Memories of her parents, her past joys, and even her mistakes became guides, helping her shape the future with intentionality and care. The house became a mirror of her heart, once broken and cold, now slowly filling with warmth, life, and love. Nighttime brought a different kind of healing. Lena and Eli would sit together on the floor of the living room, wrapped in blankets, a small fire flickering in the hearth. She would read to him, tell him stories of her own childhood, and listen as he shared his small triumphs and worries. These simple rituals became sacred, reminders that connection and presence were as essential as the repairs to walls or roofs. Through these quiet, intimate moments, Lena discovered the true meaning of home, not just a physical space, but a sanctuary of trust, comfort, and love. By the end of the week, Lena felt a profound change. The house, once abandoned, mirrored her own journey. Each repaired wall reflected resilience. Each cleared room symbolized emotional clarity. And every laugh shared within its walls confirmed that healing, like rebuilding, was a process, gradual but unstoppable. Lena understood now that her heart, like the house, was ready to embrace life fully once again. Spring had given way to early summer, and the ranch was beginning to show signs of life. Wildflowers bloomed along the edges of the property, and Eli's laughter often echoed through the open fields. Lena's heart swelled at these small triumphs, but the work of rebuilding the house and of rebuilding herself was far from over. Just when she thought the worst had passed, life reminded her that progress often comes hand in hand with obstacles. It began with the weather. A sudden, violent summer storm swept over the ranch one afternoon, turning the softening earth into mud and lashing the partially repaired house with wind and rain. Water seeped through a section of the newly patched roof, dripping into the living room and puddling near the fireplace. Lena's stomach tightened at the sight. She had worked tirelessly for weeks, only to see the elements undo her labor in moments. Her hands, raw from patching leaks, trembled with frustration as she assessed the damage. Eli watched with wide, concerned eyes. "Mom, is it going to be okay?" he asked softly, clutching his small blanket. Lena knelt beside him, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "Yes, baby. It's going to be okay. We'll fix it. We always do." Her words were meant to comfort him, but in her heart she felt the weight of doubt pressing against her resolve. Could she truly handle this on her own? Repairs after the storm were grueling. Lena climbed ladders in the pouring rain, patched shingles with hands slick from water, and reinforced beams that threatened to buckle under the strain. Every task seemed magnified in difficulty, every obstacle heavier than the last. There were moments she wanted to give up, to step back and accept that perhaps this house, this dream, was beyond her. But then she would look at Eli, his small hands helping where he could, his unshakable trust in her, and she found the strength to continue. Physical exhaustion was only part of the challenge. Lena's emotional resilience was tested as well. The storm forced her to confront long-buried fears, the possibility of failure, the fear of being alone, and the haunting memory of abandonment that had driven her to reclaim the house in the first place. Nights were sleepless, filled with the sound of rain tapping against windows and wind howling through gaps in the walls. She held Eli close, whispering promises of safety into his ear, even as she silently questioned her own ability to keep them both secure. Yet, amidst the setbacks, Lena discovered something vital: perseverance. Each repaired roof panel, each patched window, each reinforcement of a weakened wall became proof that she was stronger than she realized. Even when the storm raged and her body ached, she found solace in small victories. A leak stopped, a beam held firm, a floorboard was secured. Progress was slow, but it was real. By the end of the week, the storm had passed, leaving the ranch damp but resilient. Lena stood on the porch, mud-streaked and exhausted, watching the sun break through gray clouds. Eli ran through the field, calling for her to join him. For a moment, she let herself breathe, letting the weight of fear and fatigue lift just slightly. She realized that setbacks were not the end of the journey, they were part of it, shaping her strength and deepening her determination. The house, battered but standing, mirrored Lena's own spirit. Though storms could test her, they could not break her. Each trial only proved that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. And as she watched Eli laugh in the sunlight, she whispered to herself, "We can face anything, together." Summer settled over the ranch with a gentle warmth, softening the harsh edges of the land and the house alike. Lena had faced storms, setbacks, and long weeks of solitary labor. But now she felt a new kind of energy coursing through her veins. The combined strength of her own determination and the quiet support of a growing community. It began with small gestures. Mrs. Callahan stopped by with fresh-baked bread and a cheerful smile. As she had countless times before, the young couple next door offered to help stain the porch and mend the fences. A retired carpenter showed up one afternoon with a toolkit and an encouraging nod, demonstrating techniques for reinforcing beams and securing doors. Each act of kindness bolstered Lena's spirit, making the overwhelming work of restoration feel achievable. What surprised Lena most was how naturally Eli embraced the community. He ran errands with neighbors, carried tools, and even helped distribute supplies. His laughter became a magnet for others, a reminder that this wasn't just a renovation project, it was the rebirth of a home filled with life and hope. Watching him interact, Lena realized that connection wasn't a weakness. It was a source of power and joy. Together, they tackled the house in earnest. Roof panels were repaired and reinforced. Windows were sealed against drafts, floors polished and patched. Walls were painted with soft, inviting colors that brightened the once darkened rooms. Lena directed the work with a quiet authority, delegating tasks but leaving room for creativity and contribution. Each wall, each repaired corner, was a tangible testament to resilience and cooperation. Even the garden, which had long been a tangle of weeds and frost-bitten plants, began to bloom under their collective care. Mrs. Callahan brought seedlings. The young couple helped till the soil, and Lena and Eli planted vegetables and flowers side by side. The act of nurturing the land mirrored the nurturing of the home. Each sprout, each blossom symbolized hope, growth, and the promise of new beginnings. Beyond the physical labor, the community's presence brought emotional healing as well. Stories were shared, laughter echoed through the rooms, and a sense of belonging began to fill the spaces that had been empty for so long. Lena discovered that home wasn't just about walls or a roof, it was about people, care, and shared effort. She felt a deep gratitude for those who had stepped in to help, transforming her struggle into a journey of connection. By late summer, the house had changed almost unrecognizably. The living room glowed with sunlight streaming through clean windows. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread and herbs. The bedrooms were tidy, inviting, and full of warmth. The once frozen, abandoned home was now vibrant, welcoming, and alive, a haven for Lena, Eli, and anyone who came to share in their life. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Lena stood on the porch with Eli in her arms, surveying the work that had been done. The house hummed with life, and the soft murmur of neighbors leaving for the night reminded her of the bonds that had been forged. She felt a swell of pride and humility. They had rebuilt more than a house, they had rebuilt a home, a community, and a sense of belonging that neither storm nor solitude could destroy. Eli leaned against her shoulder, sleepy but smiling. "Mom, it's really warm in here now," he whispered. Lena hugged him tightly. "Yes, baby. It's warm because it's ours, and because of everyone who helped us along the way." She realized that while she had started this journey alone, she had never truly been alone. The house, once abandoned and frozen, now reflected the love, effort, and shared humanity of all who had contributed. Lena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. The house was a home again, not only through her labor, but through the connection and care that now filled every room. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had built something stronger than walls. They had built a life worth living. Autumn arrived gently, painting the ranch in shades of gold, amber, and crimson. The air carried a crispness that hinted at approaching winter, but inside the house, warmth radiated from every corner. Lena stood in the living room, Eli playing nearby with a wooden toy truck they had restored together. She looked around at the home they had rebuilt, and for the first time in years, a deep sense of peace settled over her. The walls were no longer cold and barren. Sunlight poured through polished windows, reflecting off freshly painted surfaces and revealing shelves neatly stocked with books, photographs, and keepsakes. The scent of baked bread and spiced tea lingered in the air, a small but powerful reminder of the life they had infused into the house. Every repaired floorboard, every mended window, and every brushstroke of paint spoke of resilience, patience, and love. Eli ran into her arms, his face flushed with excitement. "Mom, look! I made a road for the truck!" he exclaimed. Lena smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "That's amazing, baby. You've done such a good job helping our home come alive." She realized that this house had given him more than shelter. It had given him a sense of belonging, a foundation of security, and a place where joy could grow freely. Neighbors still visited occasionally, drawn by curiosity or affection, but Lena no longer felt the pressure of isolation. She had learned that asking for help was not weakness. It was a bridge to community. The people who had stepped in over the months had not only repaired walls and roof, they had nurtured hearts, including hers. She found herself laughing more easily, sharing stories, and even accepting invitations to small gatherings. Feeling the richness of connection that had once seemed impossible, Lena took a quiet moment to walk through the rooms, pausing in each to reflect. The kitchen reminded her of afternoons teaching Eli to knead dough, of conversations filled with laughter, and of quiet evenings sipping tea as the fire crackled. The bedrooms were sanctuaries, their soft blankets and warm light offering rest and comfort. The living room, once a cavern of frost and dust, now invited people to sit, talk, and simply exist in safety and warmth. It was more than a house, it was a home in every sense of the word. Standing on the porch at sunset, Lena watched Eli chase a stray dog across the yard. The hills glowed in the fading light, and the wind carried the faint scent of autumn leaves and freshly turned earth. She thought about the long journey to this moment, the storms weathered, the nights spent anxious and lonely, the doubt and fear that had once weighed so heavily. And she realized something profound. Through rebuilding this house, she had rebuilt herself. She knelt in the grass, pulling Eli close. "Do you see, baby? This is our home now. Warm, safe, and ours. We built it together." His small arms wrapped around her neck, and for a moment, the past, the loss, the abandonment, the fear seemed to fall away. What remained was love, perseverance, and the promise of a future filled with hope. As night settled, the house glowed softly from within, a beacon of warmth against the cool autumn sky. The fire crackled in the hearth, and Lena tucked Eli into bed, watching him drift off with a peaceful smile. She lingered a moment longer, placing her hand on the wall they had repaired together, feeling the tangible proof of their journey. This house, abandoned and frozen not long ago, was now a haven of warmth, love, and life. And Lena knew, in the deepest part of her heart, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they could face them. Because they had already built more than walls, they had built a home, a family, and a life brimming with hope. And in that warm, glowing space, Lena finally allowed herself to believe they were truly home.